Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Brain Bean here. Thank you for watching. Welcome back to all you new people. I hope you enjoyed this one because today we're going to be taking a look at a full AMD Ryzen 5 system build. And I'm very grateful to my buddy Cody, who actually put off building his system for over a week. And we all know how hard it is when you got all those components sitting there. You just want to build the things. I don't know how he had the willpower, but I'm grateful to him for that. This is a really cool red and black themed PC build. It's all for around $1,000. So with that in mind, I really hope you guys enjoy this one, and let's take a look at this system. So let's go ahead and just start by taking a look at all the components going into this build. Now, of course, we're using an AMD Ryzen 5 1600 3.2 GHz processor. All of this is going to be sitting on an ASRock Fatality X370 Gaming K4 motherboard. We've got some G-Skill Ripjaws 5 series. We've got 16 gigs of RAM going into this build. Now, our graphics card is going to be the PNY GeForce GTX 1070. And all of this is going to be going into a Thermaltake View 27 so that we can get some nice visibility of that red and black theme that we've got going on. And all of this will be powered by an evga 450 watt bronze certified fully modular power supply. So as you guys can see here in some of these shots, this motherboard is an absolutely gorgeous red and black themed motherboard. And you'll see this red and black theme going on throughout the entire setup. Now, of course, the first step was to get this motherboard and just set it down on its box that it came in and get that CPU installed. Now, of course, we're using that Ryzen 5 that I mentioned earlier and being very, very careful not to bend any of the pins. We got that processor installed. And you know, this is one of those steps that no matter how many PCs you built, you just have to make sure you take your time and don't screw it up because it's always a little bit stressful. So after getting that processor installed, we turned our attention over to the RAM. Now, as you can see, this G-Skill Ripjaws RAM that we're using has a really nice metallic red that ties into that motherboard really, really nicely. And I personally recommend installing the RAM before the CPU cooler just so that you have more room to work and you don't have to worry about things getting in the way so much. And after seeing that RAM installed, you can see that it just really ties in so nicely with that metallic red and black theme that we have going on. Once we got that initial motherboard setup out of the way, we turned our attention over to the case and getting it ready to accept the motherboard. And one of the cool things about this motherboard is that not only does it have that nice red and black theme, but the little I/O cover that comes with it as well also keeps up with that red and black theme. And I think nice little accents like this really help just elevate your setup a little bit more and make everything come together really nice. So we're using a Thermaltake View 27 case here, and this is one of my personal favorite cases just because that little gull wing design over the top there lets you look down and to the side into your build and just helps you show it off a little bit more. It's also just a really clean, nice looking case. So once we had all of our standoffs ready to go, we just pop that I/O cover in there and get the motherboard slid in so that we can get that CPU cooler installed. After we got that motherboard secured, we moved on to install the CPU cooler. Now, because this is a bit of a budget build, we decided to go with the stock cooler, and lucky for us, the AMD stock cooler actually looks a little bit beefier than Intel's, and it also has a little bit more aggressive design, so it still looks good with this setup. And we both agreed that since he's not going to be doing any overclocking right now, this is something that can easily be changed out later. With most of the core guts installed into the computer now, I wanted to turn our attention over to just getting all the fans installed. That way we could do all of our cable management at the same time. So on this View 27, we cracked open the front and just went ahead and removed those dust filters and put in a couple of 120mm Thermaltake Ring 12 RGB fans. And we went with the RGBs, even though this is a red and black theme, just to give us a little bit more options when deciding how to illuminate the case. Now, after we had the case all ready to go and all our fans installed, we got our evga 450 watt power supply out and started selecting which cables we're going to need to power the build. And I always recommend you do this before installing the power supply into the computer, because when you're dealing with something like a power supply shroud in this build, it's just a lot more convenient to have all the cables plugged into the supply, and that way you don't have to reach underneath and at awkward angles to try to get things installed. Now, you'll also notice in the clips that I'm showing here, it's showing the power supply upside down. We didn't install it at that orientation. This was more of our test fit that I recorded, and then when we actually installed it, we flipped it around the correct way. Now, I think most of you guys know what comes next. Yes, I'm talking about cable management, the step that can either take as long as you want or as little time as you want, depending on how clean you want everything to look. Now, I opted to at least have this look as clean as we could get it in a reasonable amount of time. And when I do my cable management, I like to start with the thickest cables first and then work my way down to the easiest to manage cables. And a good rule of thumb when you're doing cable management is to just try to have as little of the cable actually exposed on the front side of the case. And luckily most of these cases do have holes already pre-made to kind of allow you to do that and get those cables exactly where you want them. Another thing I like to do when I'm doing the cable management is to not really secure the cables on the backside. If anything, I might use some twist ties so they'll be easy to undo later if I need to swap things around. And once you have kind of a good working rough layout, then you can start to work your way into doing some zip ties and just get everything nice and secured to the back. That way you can easily close the case without having to mash anything in there. And that's why I like to start with the big cables first, so you can kind of minimize the amount of crossing of cables that you have and try to work around the bigger cables so that it's easier to close. Now, as you can see, we did a pretty good job at keeping all those cables nice and tidy around all of the metal parts of the back of the case there. I try not to have any cables running around where there's open windows or anything to the back where you might see it and it look messy. It's definitely not the most beautiful cable management job, but for something that only took us about 20-30 minutes or so, I think we did a pretty good job. Now, the interesting thing about the SSD is initially we were just going to hide it in the little bracket they have to mount it in the back of the case, but when we opened it up and we saw this nice carbon fiber pattern with a little red stripe there, we knew we had to find a way to get it in the front of the case. Now, unfortunately, if we mounted it the easy way, it would have been upside down, so we had to find a way to route those cables around the back of the fans, but I'm really happy we finally found a way to make it work because just little accents like this really help tie the build together. And of course, saving the best for last, it's time to put in that PNY GTX 1070. Now, of course, my buddy already did such a good job tying in all of these components, making sure the red and black theme was cohesive all the way throughout the build, but when we got this card out of the box, just like that SSD I showed you guys, we didn't realize how nice those red metallic accents on that cooler were going to look. And we weren't initially going to do a riser for the build, but once we saw how nice they looked on the cooler, we knew we had to orient that GPU so that you could see it through the window really nicely. So lucky for us, I did have an extra Thermaltake riser cable laying around, and this Thermaltake View 27 case already comes ready to go with that riser there for you so that you can put the video card that way. So it was a no-brainer at this point. We had to orient the card that way, and I'm so happy we did it because, as you can see, it just helps really accent that red and black theme, and I really believe that anytime you can do anything to really help your theme in your case pop, it's just so worth it. And as you guys can see, I really think it made the difference in this build. And now the moment of truth. I don't care how many computers you've built, I think we all experience a little bit of anxiety when we go to hit that power button for the first time. So of course, after we checked to make sure all of our cables were secure, everything was plugged in well, we hit that power button and saw this build come to life. And guys, I think this build is the perfect example of how just spending a little bit of extra time picking out components that all complement each other can really make for an outstanding build. Everything from that metallic coated G-Skill RAM to the nice red plating on that PNY 1070, all the way to those Thermaltake RGB fans, this build just came together so nicely. I think it was a lot better than we had hoped in the first place. But I'd like to know what you guys think, because there are some things we would like to add to this build in the future. Like I mentioned, we want to go with an aftermarket all-in-one cooler to start, and I do think that adding a nice little RGB strip at the top of the case just to kind of shine some light down and really accent all of that red and black theme we have going on definitely would make the difference in the build. But let me know again what you guys think about the build and what you would add to it in the comments down below. Well, that's it for this build video, guys. As always, if you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up to show your support. And if you're new here on the channel, I'd love to see you subscribe because we've got a lot more build videos just like this one coming your way in the near future. You can also follow me on Twitter at BrainBeanGaming. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.